Welcome to the Hey Legal Quiz with me, Edith Forrest. The aim of this quiz is to provide some light-hearted entertainment during lockdown and beyond. I'll be asking 20 questions of leading Scottish legal figures, questions which give insight to their careers and their lives beyond the law. So let's begin. So I'm joined today by Alex Prentice QC. Thank you so much, Alex, for agreeing to take the quiz.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, so we will get started with our 22 questions. So our first question for you, Alex, is if you weren't a lawyer, what would you be?
That's a tough one because I did decide fairly early on that I wanted to be a lawyer, but I was also interested for a long time in architecture and really thought about that. I've no idea if I'd have been any good at it or not, but I do like that subject, and I'm quite interested in buildings and things like that. One of the things I really enjoy about my job is that we encounter all sorts of different disciplines, from medicine to engineering to ballistics, all sorts of things. So the job actually encompasses a wide range of things.
Yeah, absolutely. You almost have to become a bit of an expert in different things depending on what kind of case you're dealing with, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and you do gain knowledge across the board from whatever subject. You know, you can really become an expert in firearms and all sorts.
Yes, and sometimes it's really unusual things like the study of insects arriving on dead bodies and what that can mean, etc. So it's a really great part of the job for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Question number 2 is, did you have a nickname at school, and if so, what was it and why were you given it?
I didn't. Certainly not that I was ever aware of, and I've never really been called things like Sandy or Eck or anything like that. So the short answer is no, I didn't.
No. Fair enough. Okay, and just sticking with school, question number 3 is, were you a SWATy type at school?
I don't know if I would say SWATy. I did realise fairly early on that you had to do your homework and you had to put a bit of effort into work, and I'm certainly no kind of genius, so I had to work hard, and I did that. So to that extent, others might think so, but that's not to say there wasn't an element of fun at school as well.
Yeah. I don't know. I think some people might think you are a genius, Alex.
No, I certainly don't. I've spent a whole career giving that impression, perhaps. But
that's good. I think a lot of it is about perception, isn't it? So don't disillusion people. Question number 4 is, what was your first job?
My very first paid job was acquired when I was on holiday at school holidays in summer, and I just went around various places to see if I could get a job to earn some money, and I got a job as a kitchen porter in what was then the North British Hotel in Edinburgh, now the Balmoral, and that was hard work. You had to turn up about 5:30 in the morning. You were given a couple of towels, and they were to lift hot things. So I dare say the health and safety aspects of it were not as they would be now. But working in a frantic kitchen in hot surroundings and transferring food and washing pots and pans, peeling potatoes, all sorts of things. So it was hard work, but it meant I had money, and that made it quite pleasurable for me.
Yeah, and how long did you do that for?
I don't really remember. It must have been most of the summer. It wasn't every day, but throughout the 6 or so weeks in the summer.
Yeah, it didn't give you a taste for life in a kitchen, obviously.
No, absolutely not.
Oh dear. Question number 5 is, how do you define success?
Really, if I achieve a sense of satisfaction and contentment by doing the best I can at a job, and if I've put proper effort into things, then that's enough for me. It's not financial reward. It's much more than that. You need to enjoy your job. I've been very lucky where I've always enjoyed what I've done. I have friends who earn far much more money than me, but have jobs in which I get the impression that they're just looking to retire now rather than enjoying the job. And I've never found that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, that certainly is. I think if you're waking up of a morning dreading going to your work, then there's something far wrong, isn't there? Yeah. I must say, I do have mornings I do wake up feeling like that, but not every morning, thankfully.
Well, that's not to say there's not the odd case or the odd court hearing that you have that you dread. That happens, but overall, I've always enjoyed my work.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's great. Question 6, your favourite drink?
I'm going to settle on an actual drink. I do quite a lot of hill walking, and on many occasions used to go walking with a good friend of mine, John Dunn, who sadly passed away last year. Mm-hmm. And I remember on one occasion, there were about 12 of us, went up a Munro, and we huffed and puffed and sweated to the top of the mountain, and the elation of that being over and the panoramic view you get is great reward. But John produced from his rucksack 12 small tins of gin and tonic for everyone in the party. And we sat and had a drink. And the context, the atmosphere, the scenery and the company were all just terrific. It made it a very memorable thing to do. I don't imagine it's the best ever joint gin and tonic, but the circumstances made it so. Mm-hmm. More generally, a pint of IPA in the Bow Bar goes down very well.
Very good. Okay, question number 7. What don't you like about your job? Something that I don't always notice, and that is the all-absorbing nature of the work. Occasionally, we're involved in lengthy or complex cases, and I've been in a few that have run for in excess of 3 months. And when you're in a case like that, you don't just get to do the court work during the day, 10 to 4, and go home and then read a book or watch television. You have to continually work. You're always thinking about your closing speech. You're always dealing with the evidence as it emerges, because it's often not as you plan. So you have to constantly work and revise the case, and that can eat into the weekends as well, and that has an impact on family life. And I don't always notice it, but sometimes I do try and do something about it. So that's a downside of the job. Yeah, and I suppose, and maybe this is part of your answer as we get to the end of the questions, but I think this has been a period of time to make you focus and realise, life, certainly my life before was frantic, and I think that goes for many people. It's
very much, I agree, yes.
So it is, I think the all-consuming part, especially with trials, they do really take it out of you, don't they? And
yes.
Even in the downtime, you're still thinking constantly, quite often, I should have done that better, or I need to do this, or I need to make sure this happens.
Yeah. And of course, none of us have the luxury of just having one case. You have a whole raft of cases which you have to think about.
Yeah. Plates, I always align it to plates spinning. You get to the end of the line and then you're back. Okay. Question number 8. Which is the most memorable case that you have done to date?
That's a tough one, because I've been very fortunate and I've been involved in a lot of fairly high profile and interesting cases for a variety of reasons. But the one which I thought I would refer to is the prosecution over the murder of Surjit Singh Chokar. That was a murder which occurred in November of 1998, and long before I was anywhere near Crown Office. And as a result of some bad decisions, there were 2 trials. No convictions were achieved in relation to that. And following some comments by the trial judge, 2 inquiries were carried out, one into the decision-making process of that case, and the other to look at the more wider way in which the prosecution service deal with victims and witnesses. And it resulted in significant change, particularly the latter, and it caused a service to be created to assist victims and witnesses in cases. And we deal with cases in a much better way than we do now. So that was something good that came out of the inquiries. But of course, justice had been denied to the family of Mr. Chokar all these years. There was a change in the law which resulted in the Double Jeopardy Act, which meant that in very limited circumstances, new evidence being one of them, an appeal court could set aside an acquittal and permit a retrial. And new evidence did emerge in that case, and I made an application to the appeal court and got permission to retry one of the persons who had been originally tried. And that there was a lot on that case. It's not the most complicated case I've ever done, but it had a number of challenges, not least because it was very old by the time of the trial in, I think, 2016, which is a long time after the original case, and not all the materials were still available, so we had to contend with that. And of course, the witnesses' memories and perceptions had changed over the years. But it was a very important case, as indeed all High Court cases are. But this one, especially for the family, it was defended extremely well and robustly, as you would expect, by Donald Finlay. And it was quite a tense case, and ultimately a conviction was achieved. And there was a sense of justice for the family. Sadly, Mr. Chokar's father had passed away before the trial, but that sticks in my mind. There are others, but that's one that I would make reference to.
Sure, with far-reaching implications in many directions.
Yes, it still does to this day, yes.
Absolutely. Question number 9 is, tell me one thing that would surprise me about you.
I was trying to think about that. I suppose one thing might be that at one time I was a professional DJ.
Wow.
And with a time when we used 45 singles as opposed to CDs or computers and things, with twin decks, and you would line up records so that they started on time and things. And I didn't do that for very long, but I did that. And I still have a couple of boxes of singles somewhere in the loft, no doubt. But, so I don't know if that's surprising or not, but that's the only thing I could think about.
That is quite surprising. And what kind of genre of music was it that you played, Alex?
All sorts. It was really in the 70s, so it was 70s disco music and some northern soul and things like that. So all sorts of things.
And would you go and play at people's parties and gigs and things?
No, not really. It was at a nightclub in Edinburgh, and I never didn't do the mobile thing, but did that for a while. It didn't last terribly long, but that was, I suppose that's unusual.
That's pretty cool. You had a spot in a nightclub.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds bad, very surprising, but that does surprise me about you. Question number 10. What traits in others irritate you most?
That's easy for me. Bad timekeeping. I cannot stand myself being late for anything, and it's probably having had a career in court, because you're always working towards timetables, and certainly you would never want to be late for a court. But I get quite stressed if people are not where they should be on time. And I've never quite understood the social convention that if you're invited to someone's house for 7:30, that really means 7:30. I'll be there at 7:30, and much to my wife's irritation that we're always first at events. But that's the thing. So I like to see good timekeeping, and bad timekeeping irritates me.
Okay. Question number 11. Favourite flavour of crisps?
I don't eat a lot of crisps, but if I did, probably cheese and onion.
Okay. That seems a popular choice amongst many of our guests.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm not a huge crisp eater either, but I'm surprised that how many people aren't that fond of crisps. You know, I can't think of anyone who's enthused about the crisp question. So, but you're cheese and onion too. Okay. Question 12 is, which book would you recommend that everyone should read?
That's a tough question because there are so many terrific books to read, but the one I would recommend is a book called All That Remains, A Life in Death, and it's by Professor Dame Sue Black, a forensic anthropologist who has written about her career to date, but it's also a very personal account of life, death, and the process of dying. So I thoroughly recommend it. It deals with some big subjects, but it's a very easy read.
Okay. It's actually a book that I've had recommended to me as well. I haven't quite got round to buying it, but that's interesting, and I certainly will get it now that you've recommended it too, Alex. So well worth a read.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Question number 13 is, do you have any irrational fears?
I don't know about irrational fears. I'm not great with heights and sort of sheer drops, which is a bit of a problem because I like hill walking a lot, and sometimes you find yourself on a ridge, which is not all that great. But I suppose the irrationality comes from a compulsion I seem to have to want to put myself in some of these situations. And that was probably best illustrated by a visit a few years ago to Florence. We went there, and in Florence there's the Duomo, a great big domed building, and you can go to the top of it.
Right.
And I just knew it was not going to be for me, but I really wanted to do it because the view was bound to be terrific.
Yeah.
And you go inside the building and you make your way through a passage in the dome itself on the inside, and it's a fairly claustrophobic trek all the way up inside the dome, and you can't see outside, it's completely enclosed. And then suddenly a door opens and you find yourself in this tiny platform with a metal fence around it on top of this huge bulbous dome that drops away from you at great height. And although the vista is terrific with Florence and the hills beyond, I just spent my whole time absolutely pressed hard against the wall, terrified of it and trying to enjoy it, but then equally trying to remove myself from it as well.
Yeah, you're actually making me feel quite scared as you talk about it. But yeah, I can imagine that's spectacular, but at the same time, utterly terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, goodness. And how many people actually fitted onto the...
Well, there were more than I liked. I'm sure they didn't control it. It wasn't crowded, but there were quite a lot of people. And of course, if you have that fear, you really don't want people near you because irrationally you think they're going to trip you up or something. And
absolutely.
I don't know.
Or moving too much because the whole thing collapses.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh dear. Question number 14 is, how old are your oldest pair of shoes?
I'm not sure, probably a pair of proper walking shoes, which are about 15 or 16 years old. I've got several pairs, and I should really replace them earlier than that, because the last thing you want is be up on a hill somewhere and they leak. And so they should probably be looked at. But I'm not too bad at looking after shoes, even work shoes. I do clean them and put them aside and look after them, so they tend to last quite a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, question 15. Who has had the biggest influence on your career in the law?
Like everyone else, there's always a number of people who have an influence on your career, either directly or indirectly. So it was tough to try and narrow it down, but there are three people I would probably identify as having significant parts of my career. One is George Moore, a solicitor in Edinburgh, is now retired, who was probably one of the first batch of criminal defence lawyers who did the job properly, as it were. A lot of people like Joe Beltrami in Glasgow and others. And I worked for him, and that created a real interest in criminal work. I also worked for Peter Gillam, a solicitor who later became a sheriff, in relation to civil work, and he was a tremendous mentor as well and of great influence in my career. And the third person would be Lord Boyd of Duncansby, who, as Lord Advocate, appointed me as an outsider, as an advocate depute at a time when the pool for recruiting advocates depute was pretty narrow, and that caused a turn in my career that I never ever expected, and has been of great importance to me. So these are the three people who provided certain platforms. There are many, many others, but I would settle on those three.
Yeah, and it's probably a silly question to ask, but do you have a preference? It's maybe not a silly question, but do you have a preference in terms of defence or prosecution? You've been with Crown Office for quite some time now, haven't you?
I have. It's hard to say. I did defence work for a long time, and I enjoyed that enormously, and I enjoy what I do now as well. The changeover is more to do with it. For the prosecution, you're in the driving seat. So the very first case I ever prosecuted, I found myself against 5 very experienced counsel, and I prepared my case as best I could with witness statements and productions, all the rest of it, and took the evidence of the first witness and sat down. There was no cross-examination. Right. The judge said, "Next witness." I thought, so that was a real, so that was the thing I found most of it changing, because as a lawyer, you present your case. Now, I'm not sure it would be all that different if you're defending or prosecuting. You want to do as best you can. I would go back to defence work. I don't dislike it, but I enjoy what I do now. And the thing about prosecution work, I've been exposed to some things I probably would never have seen otherwise. So I've enjoyed that aspect of it.
Absolutely. And you get quite settled, don't you, once you get into a way of working? As you say, the change is the
yes.
difficult bit, and then once you get settled in, you can then settle in and I suppose enjoy it, as you're saying,
yes.
the job. Yeah.
Yes, and as people, perceptions, I suppose, change, because all the time, you're a defence lawyer for a very long time. I've now been a prosecutor for a long time. And it was probably best summed up a few years ago when I walked past the Sheriff Court, and someone who I think I'd probably represented many years ago came up to me and pointed and said, "You used to be like Prentice."
Well, that's good. Oh dear. Question number 16. What is your favourite chocolate bar?
Probably fruit and nut type of chocolate bar. Again, it's not something I make a conscious effort of buying, but if I have one, I would certainly eat it and not nibble, probably finish it.
Quite right. Question 17. What's the fanciest event you've ever been to?
I've been to quite a number of legal and charity events in castles and all sorts of places, which were very spectacular in their own way. But if I may be permitted to stretch the word fancy just slightly beyond its normal limits, I'd probably settle on an event last year. I went down to London with my son to Hyde Park to see Neil Young and Bob Dylan in concert, in an open-air concert, and it was, I'd never been to a thing like that before. I mean, I like going to live music and do quite often in smaller venues, but this was a very, very large event, and I was a bit apprehensive about it, but it was very, very well organised. There were other people appearing as well. It lasted all day, and the stage setting, the sound, and even the atmosphere was terrific. So I really enjoyed that. It was a great day.
Great. Question 18. What quirks do you have?
That's probably something you need to ask other people. If I could think of one, it would be, I really don't like butter, and I don't eat it ever. And people think that very strange sometimes, that you could eat bread without butter, but that's a quirk, I suppose. Okay.
And do you remember ever eating butter, or a time where
I never liked it. Never liked it.
Just a thing you don't take to.
No.
Okay. Question 19. What is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
From a professional standpoint, probably what Peter Gillam once said to me is that in litigation, do not ever fall out with the clerk of court, or indeed any other of the court staff. And I would like to think I didn't need to get that advice, but it's good advice to have, and certainly good advice to follow. In the court atmosphere, you really need to make sure that you're not seen as pompous or anything like that, and you treat everyone with respect, including your opponent, of course. Occasionally in an adversarial system, things can get a little terse at times, but there's no excuse for discourtesy or falling out with someone, and I always avoid that.
Yeah, and you always hope that even if there is a bit of a tense time in the court that by the time you get outside the courtroom, things have smoothed over and you're all pals again?
Yes, I think so. I mean, again, perception of others is that lawyers are always at each other's throats, and that's not the case. I did a case over the death of Arlene Fraser many years ago, the prosecution of Nat Fraser, and that was televised. And part of the programme showed myself and my opponent, John Scott QC, in discussion. And we didn't actually know they were going to film these bits. We were told it was only the interviews and the court bit, but they caught some private discussions in the well of the court. And when that programme was broadcast, one of the most common things said to me was that people were surprised that we were so friendly, given that there's an adversarial system. So I think, as I say, people probably think it's more aggressive than it truly is. And so, yes, and that's always been my experience. I've never found that there's a problem beyond what might be a sudden spat in court is quickly forgotten. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Although I suppose there are the exceptions, but few and far between. Question number 20 is, what job would you be terrible at?
Probably something like working on a fishing trawler or an oil rig or something like that. The environment that these people work under is not something I could do, and I really admire people that do that. I couldn't do it.
No, you like your home comforts and feet steady on the ground. Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. Question 21. What is the weirdest talent that you have?
I was trying to think what people would find to be weird, because I have a number of interests, but I suppose one of them is I'm a member of a swimming club, and I like going swimming quite often, and I can and enjoy swimming underwater for quite far distances.
Really?
And that I don't know if people would find that weird or not, but I can go quite far, and I enjoy very occasionally, if on holiday, being underwater, snorkeling and things, but I seem to be able to do quite long distances without having to come up for air.
Fantastic.
Is that weird? I don't know.
I don't know if it's weird. I think it's certainly a talent. And our final question 22, is what have you enjoyed most about lockdown?
Well, I've been quite lucky because I've been working since it started. We've been able to set up computers and things at home. So most of the work that I do, I've been able to continue working, and therefore the pace of life has slowed to an extent because I don't have to travel places. So that's probably the main thing. And I'm also lucky I have a garden, and I appreciate it won't be the case for everyone, but for working a while, I can do something quite intense and then take my dog out for a walk and then return to working again. So I've enjoyed that aspect of it. It's tempered slightly by the distant roar I hear of cases coming back, because we're going to face some real challenges when we get back to something close to normal.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose it's just enjoying it whilst enjoying it.
Indeed.
I mean, is that the word? Possibly.
Indeed.
But just it definitely, I think, has allowed a time just to take stock of where your work and I suppose personal lives are just now, because it just has given time just to do that and take a breath and consider all things. But well, Alex, thank you so much. That's been a really interesting, you've been a really interesting guest and really interesting answers from you. Thank you very much indeed for taking time to take the quiz. Before you go, could I just ask you to nominate someone else to do the quiz?
Yes, I would like to nominate Ian Dogood QC.
Okay, thank you very much. Alex, thank you again. You've been a fantastic guest, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
All right, bye for now.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hey Legal Quiz. We are releasing more episodes weekly, so please sign up for free to Hey Legal on our website to access our free content, legal updates and more. Plus follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram and on all podcasting platforms.